Welcome back to Bazaar. I'm Eco, and it's time for another episode of Bazaar Talks. It's been a while. For those out of the loop, Bazaar Talks was originally meant to be a bi-weekly sort of podcast, where between patches for the game, I would talk about the metagame that was developing and give feedback on it. Because of my brief hiatus from the game and my inexperience following that, I haven't done one in a while, and I wasn't planning on doing one today, but as there's no patch today, and I think I agree with that, the game's in a pretty good state, and there have been a ton of patches leading up to today, that means I have time to slow down and do a Bazaar Talks for the current metagame, and I might do another one in like a week to 2 weeks once we've seen how it really evolves over the course of time. Because we really haven't had a ton of experience in the current metagame. It's only been stable and not dominated by one super deck for like, what, 5 days now? And I don't really feel the need to give too much feedback on any of the previous pocket metas, because pretty much all of them can be summarized by the patch note that ended them, right? Freeze-Mac Weekend existed, and then it got nerfed into the ground. Railgun Week existed, and then it got nerfed into the ground. Just looking at the patch notes gives a pretty succinct summary of what was dominating and why. I do want to briefly mention on those series of hotfixes that I do think that devs have been slightly over-nerfing cards. With Railgun, Frost Totem, and Flintstones, we all saw multiple simultaneous nerfs to the card. I think Frost Totem's the one that got hit the hardest because it was in an archetype where every bit of freeze mattered, and they already stripped out up to 3/4 of the freeze on blank slate and then hit library a day or two later. So Frost Totem feels like the one that got hit by far the hardest, and of the ones I just listed, it's also the one whose archetype is the most dead. I think Railgun is still playable. It's not great anymore. I don't think I would choose to go Railgun really, but I think Flintstone still has basically the same niche. It was pretty overtuned. The one that hurts the most is Frost Totem, but I kind of get why these are being over-nerfed at the same time, right? People are really unhappy about Railgun. It's better to go too far and then buff it back in the future. But I need to mention that I want to see them buffed back in the future, right? And I think Railgun is a little bit on the weak side right now. I think Frost Totem, Freeze-Mac in general, is really on the weak side right now. And especially with Freeze, I get over-nerfing them, because with Freeze, that sort of lives on like the edge of a knife, right? It's going to be on one side or the other. You're going to die without freezing enough to stop your opponent, and it's going to look like your build doesn't work at all, or your opponent doesn't get to play the game and you crush them. It's kind of binary like that. So I definitely see why these things are getting over nerfed, but I would like to see Freeze-Mac be a thing that exists, right? If the idea behind over nerfing Freeze is that Freeze-Mac shouldn't be playable, then we should remove all the Freeze cards from Mac's card pool, right? Like, that's how I feel. The existence of Freeze cards implies that they are meant to be good playable cards and that there should be a Freeze-Mac archetype. So seeing core pieces like Frost Totem get gutted this hard simultaneously with so many other nerfs to the archetype, and then Freeze-Mac basically isn't on the ladder at all immediately because it's been pretty much killed, these things need to be buffed back to some degree. I know nobody wants to go back to the Freeze-Mac nightmare that we were in, but the truth is that if we're going to have freeze cards, they shouldn't just be shop filler that doesn't function as a deck. They should be able to make strong, powerful boards. It's just that balancing freeze is a knife's edge thing where a little bit too far will completely ruin the meta of the game and no one's having fun. Imagine if they overbuffed Boulder or Keg just a little bit and it was super consistent. The meta would be dog shit. Freeze is the exact same sort of thing. And I do mean the exact same sort of thing, because there is no difference in killing your opponent instantly or killing your opponent over 30 seconds without letting them activate any items, right? It's the exact same thing. Just one takes longer to watch. I will also say that I think all of these balance patches, despite having minor criticisms of how hard some cards got nerfed, were definitely steps in the right direction. All the mechanical changes that happened were just huge W's across the board. I am so happy with the new enchant system, and there are a lot of builds that feel so much less stressful to play, like basically anything Pygmalion, right? Pygmalion was often so determined by what enchants you get. Letting those be informed decisions with more access to good enchants, right? You don't have to see Toxic and be like, I've got to take Toxic on the fixer up or I can't random and hope for better. Now you see Toxic on the left, Obsidian on the right, and you actually get to pick the Obsidian enchant that you would never have randomed for previously, yeah? So I think all the mechanical systematic changes have been fantastic. Even though there have been some hiccups, I think balance is steadily moving in the right direction. I just want to clearly mention that I don't like seeing archetypes have several pieces nerfed tremendously all simultaneously, and I really don't like seeing one card that's only good in one archetype take multiple nerfs while the rest of the archetype's getting hit too. Talking about Frost Totem here. And the whole point of this nitpicking isn't so much to say like, they shouldn't have done it, because I mean, I think I said in all my patch reviews, like, thank God Railgun's dead. It's too much, but thank God Railgun is dead, right? But I do want to see Railgun get some buffs later when they get the data and it's like, oh yeah, Railgun sucks in the late game, or Railgun just doesn't win on day 8 anymore because you're looking at a gold Railgun dealing 300 damage. That's your whole build? Fuck off. That's not going to win, right? Anyway, that's enough rambling. I hope the cards that have been over nerfed get to be better in the future, because all of, well, not Flintstones, but Railgun and Frost Totem in particular feel like core cards to builds that just aren't really viable anymore. And that echoes out to the entire tech archetype, the entirety of Freezemac, that these seemingly core cards just aren't really competitive unless you high roll out of your mind, in which case, like, yeah, that's every build, right? I will also mention one other thing involving the patch notes. I love the constant updates. Constantly relearning the game is something that is more enjoyable for me as a player. It is also better for me as a content creator to have constantly new metas. Just in every way, I appreciate constant patch updates. But I am not the norm. I don't know what the actual breakup is, like what percentage of the community likes the constant patches, what percentage dislikes it, but there's a good number of people who find a decent amount of constant frustration. And there's no real way to deal with the people who are upset about like having to relearn the game constantly, right? If you want to rapidly iterate and rapidly improve your game, there are going to be people who are upset that there is no status quo, there is no norm, there is no comfy place they can always fall back on because the game is constantly changing. That's just the way of it. But there are also people who like get wrecked by Railgun, take a break, get a cup of tea, come back, sit down, say, can't beat them, gonna join them. They sit down to play Railgun Dooley, and wouldn't you know it, the Dooley has been nerfed between them getting beat by it and them playing it, and they had no way of knowing because they didn't like log out to check Discord or go to the website and see if there are new patch notes, right? This happens to people. This story I'm telling you is literally a comment that was posted on one of my videos from someone who was deeply frustrated by it. So I do want to take a moment to say that while I know Tempo is already planning to like put patch notes in the game and obsolete the launcher, I also know that Tempo has had a codex of some description in the works, literally for the entire life of the game. I cannot overstate how much a codex and in-game patch notes would help for the community. Something as simple as the little pop-ups in Hearthstone that show you what's changed on the newest patch would be tremendously appreciated for a ton of players. An in-game codex, even for veteran players like me, would be really nice, especially for content creators like me, where I can actually easily show it with good UI and not just like Alt-Tab and start typing into a search bar, yeah? I think both of those things are like just massively important for the new player experience. I would genuinely rather not get new cards for a month and have both of those features be added to the game, because it is that important for the long-term health of the game that players don't feel like they're constantly getting rug pulled by new balance patches they didn't know were happening and have the ability to learn the game inside of the game. I cannot overstate how important I think those features are for the general gameplay experience of the Bazaar. There's one more thing I want to mention outside of general metagame, but it's going to be like a lengthy, silly conversation, so I'm going to save that for last. Instead, we're going to get into the current state of the metagame. And right now, I kind of feel like the metagame is pretty open and most things are pretty viable. No character is bad. If I had to, like, gun to my head, which character's the best, which are the worst, I would say Mac and Dooley are in contention for the best character, and Vanessa and Pig are in contention for the worst. And if I had to absolutely give them an order, I would say Pig is the worst, followed by Vanessa, and then Dooley, I think, is slightly worse than Mac, but I really do not know. So going through weakest to strongest with Pygmalion, I kind of feel like it's just, you're very much trying to win with the first broken thing the game gives you. There's an enormous disparity between like a showcase weapon Pygmalion or a 28-hour fitness or a Jabalian drum Pygmalion, right? And also a tremendous gap between any of those and just weapon spam Pygmalion or crook Pygmalion, right? I really cannot overstate how much Pygmalion feels like you're playing to the out of just having money so you can pivot into the first broken thing the game shows you and holding the most generally useful items while assembling some sort of tempo board in the early game as best you can. With other characters, I feel like there's a lot more pivoting being done. You would think Pygmalion with access to the most money would do the most pivoting, but that is generally not my experience. I think my most recent Pig video is exactly what I'm describing as well, where I was expecting to be playing Money Tree, but I wasn't really finding anything to make Money Tree viable. I found a relatively early Jabalian drum, and I was like, all right, all in, let's find the Jabalian drum build, and then went 10 wins on that, right? I feel like the average quality of Pig's item doesn't exist. Like if you look at the mean value of what a Pygmalion item does and then look for a Pygmalion item with that much value, that item isn't there. Pygmalion just has a ton of shit items and a couple of really busted items. And most of his shit items are actually okay because, like, yeah, Tusk Helm is terrible. But if you combo it with like 28-hour fitness or showcase or even to a much lesser degree Jabalian drum, then it's a perfectly fine one slot weapon, right? And I think that's the issue with Pygmalion. He has so many items that enable other items and so few items that are good independently. And that's a big part of why his early game tends to suck as well, is because you just haven't assembled those things. I have had no shortage of runs where I match into Pig on day 2. I'm like, yes, early game Pig. And it's a showcase enabling both the damage and shield on day 2. And it's like, oh, well, I'm fucked. I couldn't possibly beat that. Because the difference in that and literally any Pig build but that on day 2 was insurmountable. There are just specific super important Pig items at different points in the game where if you have them, and I'm not talking about the late game when I say that, I'm referring to like days 1 through 8, where certain items are the best thing you could possibly have. Silver Jabalion on day 1, for instance, right? You get Jabalion Bow, you find D1, B2, you're probably winning on day 1 all of a sudden. I feel pretty firmly that Pig's issue is across almost his entire card pool, because I can't point to a thing and be like, this is what's wrong with Pig. It's more like I would just search the small items for Pig. Let's do that, actually. Let's just go ahead and test the theory. So if I go over to items, filters, we're going to zoom out a bit because I want to go through a bunch of them quickly, so just bear with me. We go to Pygmalion, small items that start at bronze. Bandages, completely useless, only good because it enables other items. Piggles, same story for all of them. They're just fast. Brass Knuckles, trash on its own. Halati, trash on its own. Hatchet, literally all of them, right? Hot Stones, there is an item that's actually independently good. Kukri, nope. Security System, nope. Marbles, good on its own. Matchbox, I'll give Matchbox good on its own because it, like all the other non-weapon smalls enable Matchbox. I'll give Matchbox good on its own, but then I'm going to take it back immediately because it's still bonked to 5 seconds, despite the fact that it has not been viable since the bonketing happened, right? They increased the cooldown by 1 second, which is 25%, and also removed the ability to dupe it in the same patch, and it's basically been non-meta ever since. So no, I won't say that Matchbox is good. But where are we at? We are at like 3 cards that are playable so far. Oh no, it was just 2? Okay, that was the 3rd one. That's not looking good. Pepper Spray, no. Piggles, no. Piggy Bank's an econ item. Rewards card is great, but it doesn't go on your board. Ring Kings are independently good. This is just enough damage that it can go on a board. So I'll give it to 3, even though Ring Kings isn't like good on a board on its own. Steam Ladle is great in a freeze build, so not really. Bird is good. Bird is good in pretty much any situation, so I'll take it to 4. Wrist Warrior, not so much. Yo-Yo. Yo-Yo is actually trash on its own. You need something else to enable this. So looking at Pygmalion's small items, I'll drop off like 9 of them because so many were Piggles. 4 out of 25 small items felt like they did something for Pig at bronze, right? I think that's the issue with Pig. He just has a shitload of items that are like, this is good when you get Apropos Chapeau. This is good when you get Showcase. This is good when you get a property. And the reality is that none of them are good on their own. And yeah, that basically comes into why Pig is so weak in the early game. And since Pig is not even remotely close to the undisputed king of the late game, that means that Pig is not in a great spot right now. Moving on to who I view as the second weakest character, I think Pig and Vanessa are both really close, and I don't think either of them are like remotely bad, just to be clear. But I do think Vanessa's not as good as Dooley and Mac, and I think she's actually pretty close to the platonic ideal of how you want the game to play. Generally speaking, Vanessa has a ton of different builds she can pivot through. That is me playing with a clothespin in my hands and snapping it in half. This is just a constant part of Bazaar Talks videos. I'm not moving a mouse around, so I'm just fidgeting with shit and breaking it. I'm not gonna stop. But what I was saying is that aside from Aquatic Poise and Vanessa consistently being a trap that I cannot bring to any degree of success in the current meta, I feel like Vanessa has a ton of different builds she's pivoting through, all with pretty similar important parts. Treb into Shark Ray is a great example. The fact that Shot Glass is a core item and Shark Ray, Arbalest, Mantis Shrimp, Lighthouse, Anglerfish, right? There are so many items that open up new lines. Keg is a great example of this, where when you're playing, you just pick up an Incendiary rounds, and if you have Incendiary rounds when you see your first skill vendor choice, you're like, I can go to the burn skill vendor, I can look for Hotspot or Heated Shells, to a lesser degree Grease Fire, these skills that give you additional burn triggers, and suddenly you can play a Keg build in the late game. I think Vanessa has the most enjoyable pivoting of any character, and the most pivoting. Because when I say enjoyable pivoting, I just mean like a bunch of cards are used in pivots and you can do the most crazy pivots. And yeah, I think that is what Vanessa is. I think she has the smoothest gameplay pattern in terms of how much and how frequently she pivots and how the cards overlap between archetypes. I think she's incredibly well designed. With one exception, well, 2. Powder Keg and Boulder. Boulder being much more rare because generally a Boulder that is fully enabled and instantaneous is a Boulder that either hit everything it needs at high tier or a Boulder that duped a cooldown reduction item, right? And I'm torn on hating these things because generally most Vanessa builds fall off post day 13. There are very few Vanessa archetypes that are doing well in the super late game outside of crazy high rolls, and to some degree, the late game is the land of super high rolls. But Keg and Boulder, mostly Keg, Boulder is very hard to be reliable, as I just said. These are the items that are actually doing well in the late game for Vanessa because you instantaneously pop off and kill your opponent, and there's not much counterplay to that. I would actually go so far as to say that there is no difference in getting killed by a Keg or getting killed by a permanent freeze Mac build, right? Both versions of that matchup, your opponent activates their items and you die without activating yours. The only difference is whether you have to watch it for 2 seconds or 30. And I genuinely do not think it's good design for the game. As much as I think the process of like pivoting into and assembling a Keg build is sick as hell, and I think it's fun design when you're playing it, for all the same reasons that people hate item destruction and freeze, I do not enjoy matching into Keg at all. It's just like, oh, cool. How fast do you go? Oh, I'm dead already. All right, I thought I'd have time to finish the sentence. I do not think that items whose gameplay pattern is you kill your opponent instantly or you abandon the build and do something else, like these don't seem like a healthy thing to exist in the game. I dislike Keg so much, it's made me reconsider if I should dislike freeze more, because I've defended freeze as a mechanic in the past, and whenever I stop and think about it, I generally think freeze is good for the game. Top meta freeze builds are really bad for the game. I think the devs agree with that. But I don't think freeze is mechanically bad for the game, at least in small quantities. And that small quantities part is the important thing, because Keg only exists in large quantities, right? No one's playing a build that will Keg you at 10 seconds, right? That's not how the game is played. Well, they are actually. It's called Runic Blade Mac. That will Keg you at 10 seconds. No problems whatsoever with Runic Blade Mac. That's a build that puts you on a timer, and I'm completely fine with that. I have fairly huge issues, however, with Boulder and Keg doing the same thing instantaneously. I will say that I actually strongly dislike item destruction, because there is an analogy for what item destruction is like. It's like freeze an item forever. That's what it actually does, right? There's almost no difference. It's technically a little bit better because you can't waste more freeze or slows into it since smart targeting has been removed. But I would say that item destruction is essentially freeze an item forever, and obviously I would say that that mechanic is ridiculous and bad. I've said as much on the Frozen Ice Club, or sorry, the Etarian Club several times now. I think freeze for 99 seconds at half health is ridiculous. I think item destruction is ridiculous. I have had matchups where I was playing a one weapon Vanessa with a single Obsidian Fang, and I just lost to an opponent who I would have killed before their items activated because they had Trollosaur on their board. So it destroyed the Fang when I got them to half, and I was like, all right, this build doesn't work now that Dinosaurs got released. And that's not a good state for the game to be in my opinion. I don't think that there should be an item in the pool where if you see it, you automatically lose for any build. But to get more to the point with item destruction, I find that it's incredibly polarizing, right? Like, I'm sure people have experienced this on their end, right? You're fighting a board with Rex Specs and one more item than you. Rex Specs can destroy anything. Whether or not Rex Specs destroys the item you're built around, or like the random Clamra, will determine the outcome of the match completely. And I find stuff like that super polarizing. I find that item destruction in any sort of close match where your opponent hasn't vastly outscaled your build somehow, item destruction is super random and super unpleasant, where, just like I was mentioning with Pig's average item quality, the average result of a match going into item destruction doesn't exist. One side is getting stomped depending entirely on what item gets destroyed. Anyway, we've been talking about Dooley for a while, but I assure you this is about Vanessa and about Kegs, but it's gotten to be about both of them. I don't like item destruction as a mechanic. I think it is not, I don't think it's a good design. I'm going to be honest with you. Especially designs like Trollosaur that passively destroy items, which is deeply frustrating. And it's frustrating for very different reasons than Vanessa's Keg builds. And again, I think Vanessa's in contention for worst character in the game. I don't think like, oh, you have to nerf Keg because Vanessa's too strong. What I'm saying is that Keg is not a good design for the game. I mentioned it in my patch reviews. I don't really care about the specifics of balance. I trust the developers will get the cards to where they need to be to attain good balance. I care about the designs that are a part of it, right? You can make every character have a 33% win rate by removing Mac from the game, assigning Pig Paper, Vanessa Rock, and Dooley Scissors. And that would be a perfectly balanced game of rock, paper, scissors. And it would be dog shit. I didn't sign up to play rock, paper, scissors. It would be a bad game. But you can balance anything, is my point. You don't have to create a balanced metagame because Vanessa is able to win in the late game with Keg. You can give Vanessa tools in the late game that do not just instantaneously kill her opponents to give her a viable build. I would prefer to live in that world than a world where I'm optimizing keg, because as satisfying as it is to bring a keg build together, it is infinitely more frustrating to lose to a keg build. And while I think Dooley's the strongest, I'll go ahead and go to him instead of continuing in power order with Mac, because I've been talking about his dinosaurs being frustrating for a while. I actually just really like the way Dooley plays. I will say that where Vanessa does the most pivoting and Pig goes all in on the first thing he sees, Dooley sort of strikes a happy middle ground between them, where yes, Dooley's gonna go pretty all in with whatever his first core is, right? Whatever core you pick, you're gonna be playing that days 2 through 5 without jumping out of it, pretty much guaranteed, because it represents so much early and mid game power. But then Dooley has a lot of like really bizarre late game combos he can enable that are incredibly powerful. And I think Dooley strikes a middle ground somewhere between them. So does Mac. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. But I think Dooley does like not a ton of pivoting, but he does more pivoting than Pig going all in on the first broken thing he sees, and less than Vanessa's incredibly smooth play patterns. Aside from the item destruction on dinos being super frustrating to match into, like if you're not close, it doesn't matter, right? I think a lot of people are like, item destruction's so broken, I lost to some item destruction. And like the dino board they fought could have destroyed them 100 times out of 100, even without any item destructions, right? Even great players I see videos from, they'll like lose a fight and item destruction was involved, and they'll blame item destruction when they were never going to win. I think a lot of the time, hate for item destruction is just people being upset they lost and a mechanic that isn't fun was involved. But item destruction does genuinely suck, even if it is generally exaggerated by the community how much it sucks. It's oftentimes just that the dinosaur build would have beat you. But yeah, item destruction certainly makes it more tilting to lose to, and when it's actually a close match, when it's like, gee, I sure hope Rexpex doesn't eat specifically the one item that allows me to win this, and then he eats Nitrogen Hammer? Yeah, that sucks. I'm not sure what the solution is to item destruction now that it's here. I don't know that the developers would ever be like, you know what, let's remove a mechanic from the game. That seems like it wouldn't happen, so feedback suggesting that isn't helpful. I don't have a solution for it. I just know that item destruction is the most volatile sort of matchup RNG, and I despise it as a mechanic. I will say this is unique to matching into Dooley. When it's my build, I sort of view it as like a weakness of my build. I'm not like, oh, my build is a 50% chance or whatever to not destroy important items, and I'm being weakened by RNG. I'm like, oh yeah, an unfortunate side effect of this build is there's a chance I get no value off of item destruction. It's just a weakness of what I'm choosing to play. The same way when I'm playing like card table with a Zorkid and a Shark Ray, I'm like, yeah, I really don't like this. There's a 50% chance the card table buffs the wrong guy, but like, it's just a weakness of the build I've made. I can accept it. When I'm matching into an opponent though, it's just really unpleasant. You can't rationalize it. It's just something that's happening to you, kind of like Powder Keg. I have no idea what the solution is. I can't even hazard a guess. I'm just gonna leave it at I don't like it and move on. And I guess I'll say that I really like the way Dooley plays. He has a lot of cool combos in his late game. I feel like building for multiple cores in day 1 and 2 is actually pretty interesting. That gets into something I'll circle back to in a second. I'm going to talk about income start after I do all the heroes. But generally speaking, I quite like the way Dooley plays. Unsurprising, I'll probably always say that about whichever character's number 1, unless it's like Freeze Mac Weekend. But again, oh well, Freeze Mac Weekend happened. Let's move on. Let's move on to Mac, actually. Mac's in a weird spot when it comes to pivoting, right? Because he doesn't pivot that much after the early game, and he pivots even less than he used to, right? Because Mac has big interlocking archetypes, whether it's Poppy Field or Femur, or whether you're just doing a multiple quests like a Blank Slate and a Sands of Time, and suddenly you've invested so much into these quests, it's hard to pivot out of them. So Mac has like a ton of potential to pivot, especially with his strong economy items early, whether it's lead generation with Catalyst, or it's just Catalyst generation with a Peace Roll to eat them. He has a ton of economy to pivot with. It's just that he tends to not really pivot that much. I don't know that I feel like he can't pivot. It's just that I usually don't do that much pivoting in him after like day 5. Unlike all the other characters, I tend to like be pretty deep into a Femur build or a self-poison build or some jank combo that I'm really committed to. I don't know that I think he can't pivot. It's just that I feel like his optimal play patterns don't involve as much pivoting as any other character after the first couple of days. He has a ton of pivoting in his first couple of days. And the reason I mention pivoting so much when reviewing every character is because like that's how Bazaar is supposed to work, right? The idea of a drafting game is that you're going to pivot based on what's offered to you. The game is at its most fun when you feel like you're cooking up some mad science shit and you realize there's even madder science you can do with this other card and you pivot into a different route that turns out to be better, right? I will say that I don't know if I like the design of Quest on Mac, because initially I thought they were super cool. I still kind of do. I don't dislike them at all, but they sort of feel like intrinsically they lock me into playing the quest item. I wouldn't mind if completing a quest on an item made it worth more gold or something. Something to make it feel like I'm not locked into Sands of Time because I bought 6 slow items and I've spent so much money on it, right? I don't think it necessarily needs something like that. It's just a lingering thought I have that, like, the idea of doing a quest is sort of directly opposed to the idea of pivoting out of your current board. It's sort of similar to how an older version of the game, if you got augmented weaponry, you would just keep whichever weapons you had when you got it because they would get so many more buffs because it wasn't a like passive aura thing. It was just applied to your weapons like a whetstone. So you would be committed to whatever weapons you had, even if you found otherwise better weapons because of the buffs being so important. Regardless of the weirdness I feel about Quest, I think Mac's in a really good spot. Probably not quite as strong as Dooley, but I think the quests are generally working pretty well for Mac. I think with the exception of Frost Totem, which I've already covered being directly over nerfed, all of his new cards are working pretty well. He has a decent pile of options. I do feel like he has a decent pile of cards that don't really feel like options, but maybe I'm just underestimating them. There are cards like Refractor and Test Subject Alpha, which are certainly good enough to be used in lieu of cards like Rapid Injection System and Magnus's Femur, but they are nowhere near as good. They always feel like stopgaps. I feel like Mac has a ton of those cards, which, don't get me wrong, is certainly better than having a ton of cards that literally do nothing without Showcase. Looking at you, Tusk Helm. I was going to mention that Palanquin got a lot better with the changes so that it scales your cooldown lower much faster. And it reminded me that I should mention the sickest run I've had that was nowhere near successful in the history of this game, which was, for a while, instead of having Pendulum Invuln Potion, this was double Palanquin. And anyway, I basically lost 3 consecutive times in the late game to one-shot builds and permafreeze when I just kill anyone who's playing a normal game at sort of like eel matchups. But this build was so sick. I'm really happy that Palanquin got buffed in an indirect way. And I really want to see if Palanquin's actually good now. I still have a few more experiments to run with that card. I think it's okay, but Mac just doesn't quite have the built-in crit chance scaling to do anything crazy with it. But in general, I'm pretty happy with Mac. I don't feel like I have a ton to say about Mac and Dooley as an experience, because it's easier to point out what's wrong with the other characters than what's right with Mac and Dooley, I feel like. One thing that I do want to specifically talk about before I move on to my final point is the starting kit balance. Because in the previous meta, I think it was pretty close between skill and income. You had people like me arguing income start on pretty much everyone, but I'm just a big fan of income start. I feel more comfortable playing the game that way. And there are very real arguments on different characters that skill start was better. And I think it was pretty close. Obviously, Enchanted Start will probably always be kind of a meme because it's really interesting but super high variance. But I would say in the previous meta, they were fairly well balanced. I would say in the current meta, Income Start is just the best start, which obviously as a big Income Start fan, I like that. I think that's great. And I don't want to see Income Start getting nerfed because, like, yeah, it's the best, but it's mine. And the reason Income Start's become the best is 2 different things. One is Greenheart Expedition. The ability to reliably, or at least more reliably, get the Day 9 ticket by having all the extra gold from Income Start to help you buy the ticket at Aerodrome is really, really valuable. I would say that in like maybe 1 in 5 runs, a really high number of runs, Income Start is the reason you will have enough gold to go to an Aerodrome and buy a ticket when other starts would not have been capable of doing the same thing. And considering going to the temple gets you an obscene amount of gold, enough to last the entire rest of the run outside of burning all of it at Pearl. And then on top of that, very likely gets you a proactive valuable enchantment or a completely broken relic item. Like, the Income Start stuff is just incredible because of how it interacts with buying tickets at Aerodrome. That's part of it. The other thing that happened that made Income Start really valuable, might even be more important, is that because you level up before your fights now, actually filling out your boards on day 1, 2, and to a lesser degree 3 is much easier with an Income Start, right? And extremely hard on a skill start, yeah? Like, the argument of you're going to do better on day 1 with skill start isn't as true anymore, because if you're only able to really go to one shot because you don't have any bonus starting gold, you might just not be able to fill out your board effectively. So even though you have left-handed, if you're down like 3 item slots, and sure, you usually aren't missing 3 items from your board, but they're not optimal items, right? You are much less likely to be running a genuinely good board composition because you have so much less gold on day 1, even day 2, to a lesser degree on day 3, right? Skill Start is not pivoting on day 3 ever. They don't have that kind of cash. And as a result, the new economy demands of both going to the temple and filling out your board early really boost up Income Start as a viable tempo option, and generally makes it, if not the strongest, certainly directly comparable to the strongest strategy on every character. I personally think Income Start on every character is optimal. I don't even think it's that close. I don't know if stats reflect that, and the issue is, like, the more you play a start, the better at it you get. So I have a ton of experience in this start and a lot less experience with the different economy demands of going for a different start, right? And I think my takeaway is not that Income Start's like super overpowered. I would actually like to see the base gold values of other starts be improved. I would not be upset at all to see just like at least up to 10 gold as a starting point for everybody. And then Income Starts at 20 gold and the Enchanted starts at 15 gold. Just like move the the starting gold of the other 2 starts up a little bit and see how much it can be helped. I don't look at Income Start and think, oh, it's got so much money. That's the problem. If you nerf Income Start, that'll balance it, right? Because it's like the process of failing to finish your board on a skill start sucks. No matter what you do to the other starts, they don't feel like they have enough gold. And I think generally moving the starting gold up for everyone else, but keeping income where it's at, is probably the way to slightly nerf income and meaningfully buff the others. Where the numbers fall exactly, what the best changes are, I don't know. But I do think it's currently Income Start being clearly the best. And it's in a way where Income Start isn't what needs to be nerfed, but comparatively it should get weaker with whatever buffs are given to the other ones. And by far the most sensible buffs are ones to starting gold value across the board. Anyway, let's get into something ridiculous. But that does get into something really stupid and weird I want to talk about that involved people complaining in my comments that the game is pay to win. And I will admit, during Freeze Mac weekend, the game was pay to win. That's just an objective fact. There was a tier 0 deck that beat basically everything. The entire meta completely warped around specifically Freeze Mac. Freeze Mac was by far the best thing on average you could do. And it was only available if you spent gems or money to get it, right? That is very definitely pay to win. I don't think it was done with malign intent or anything. They were obviously hotfixing other things leading up to it. And the developers have stated that they intended to include the reduced freeze duration on Frost Totem with the patch that made it slightly faster. So they ended up like grossly overbuffing free stuff by accident, just lost in the sea of other fixes they were making. Totally understandable how we got there, but it was pay to win. And I say all this because I want to set a baseline for 2 things. One, the Bazaar is capable of being pay to win with its current monetization system. I don't think it's designed to be pay to win. I don't think it's pay to win in a huge capacity. And I think it has very rarely, if ever, been pay to win. I can't think of anything other than Freeze Mac weekend where it was actually pay to win, right? But I get a lot of comments in the past week of people being like, oh man, Dino Dooley again, pay to win slop, cannot believe greedy tempo devs. And it drives me up a wall. I titled People Are Sleeping on Railgun as one of my videos, right? And there were a lot of people being like, who's sleeping on Railgun? What are you talking about? Them, the guys I was just talking about. The people saying Dino's pay to win, that opinion is just completely irreconcilable with the objective fact that Railgun was the best thing in the game at the time. And it was made weaker by purchasing the Dino expansion, right? A lot of people exist within their own bubbles and don't see other parts of the community. One of the advantages of being a content creator is I get to see people say shit I don't agree with all the time. I will heart pretty much anything anyone says on one of my videos as it like, hey, I read that and I enjoyed reading it. Not I agree with you. That's not what it means. People say shit I don't agree with all the time. And the pay to win really, really bothered me because a lot of people were complaining that the game was pay to win at a point in time where the best possible thing to do was a free-to-play only strategy that pay-to-win players could not, pay-to-play players, paying players could not perform as well because they had bought access to cards that diluted the pool. And it made me start thinking about something that I think is really interesting I want to talk about, and I saved it till the end of the video because I think it's also kind of stupid and a lot of people aren't going to care. I'm going to call this a Punnett square. I don't know if that's the right way to describe this outside of a biology setting. If it's wrong, give me a heads up as to what term I should be using. But we have 2 axes. Is it pay to win or free to play friendly versus how are the players receiving it accurately or inaccurately? And a lot of people don't really acknowledge this second part to exist. It's just like, is the game pay to win or is it free to play friendly? Just accurate assessment. Is it pay to win? That's the end of the discussion. But people are wrong about shit all the time. So they can inaccurately perceive the game. They can do what I was just talking about and inaccurately perceive a free to play friendly system as being perceived pay to win. They're wrong, but they still think it's pay to win. There's also the other side of this, which is inaccurately perceiving a pay to win system as free to play friendly. You might be like, how does that happen? It's diehard fans. It's people who don't want to acknowledge that something they like has a problem. That's all it is. During the open beta, when there was the monetization fiasco there, a lot of people were defending an objectively bad system. That's what that is. It is people who don't want to admit the flaws in something they like. It's super normal. However, this other one here, I wasn't aware of existing before the past week. I never thought of it as a Punnett square at all before now. Never thought of like, how do these things align? But having seen it now, people inaccurately believing the system is pay to win. Before now, if someone told me this viewpoint existed, I'd be like, oh, you're talking about bad faith actors. They're talking about liars. I wouldn't have thought this is a natural conclusion to come from. But uniquely, it makes sense to do this in the Bazaar because of survivorship bias, right? If you are a person who just started playing Vanessa and you only see Pig from the other side of the board, that means you're going to think Pig is just an unkillable late game god. And that's because you don't know about dying early on Pig. You're not familiar with being dead at the end of day 9 and like a percentage of your runs correlated to how good you are at the game. I don't know the exact number. It happens less to me these days, but it happened a lot when I first started playing Pig. I think that's the same with everybody, right? But because of survivorship bias and you're new to the game, you don't really know how all these systems work. You're going to come to the false perception that everything you don't have access to is stronger than it is. It's simultaneously a really interesting thing to realize it exists and also a really frustrating thing to try to solve, because I would love to be like, hey, game developers, I've got a galaxy brain, check out this problem I've assessed, here's how you fix it. But you can't fix survivorship bias in the Bazaar, right? That would be like trying to fix dying in a first-person shooter. It's like, no, that's how the game works. You can't fix it, that's just a part of the game. I think to some degree the problem comes from the level 30 expansion set. The fact that a lot of free-to-play players, not a lot of them, all of them, that all free-to-play players will be getting at most 1 week to play with this set before it's released to everyone. The same thing's sort of true with the level 15 set, right? Because the people complaining were complaining about Dino Dooley just early in the month, right? They have about 2 weeks before they get access to it, and every time it gets nerfed before they get it, it's like, ah, pay to win garbage, grah, grah, grah. And like, no, you should balance new things. You can't just leave them broken to not upset the free-to-play players, because then the meta sucks longer for everyone. But also, then the free-to-play players will just complain that it's imbalanced when it gets nerfed after they get access to it, right? Like, there's no solving it. And my first thought is like, oh, well, one thing you could do is you could have them pick which expansion they get, right? So there's no level 30 that you don't get. You pick one of two at 15, you get the other at 30. That's probably a better design in general, just for like free-to-play player satisfaction, right? It would suck to be free-to-play and the character you have access to is at level 30 and the one you don't at level 15, like, oh, woo, I unlocked Primal Dooley. I bought Mac, I don't have Dooley, right? That sucks. So I think one thing that could be done to improve it is just like pick from one of two at 15 and 30, not making it locked into a specific order. I think that would just be a better system, and that's like one of the few pieces of feedback I have that can help with it. But even then, they don't get access to the first one until like 2 weeks in. You could maybe have it be at like level 0 and level 30, just like immediately give access to one of them, but then that affects the company's bottom line. It's not actually pay to win the way it is right now. So if you change it in a way where it's still just does not pay to win, but now you make less money, that just seems like a bad decision for a company, right? So I don't really know the solution. I do think like unlinking the boxes, making it so that you just get one of two is going to be much more free-to-play friendly in general because of lack of character ownership, right? You just don't have access to everybody. And like maybe moving the first one down to like 10, having it be like 1030 instead of 1530, I don't know. I don't know the exact breakpoints for when free-to-play players get access to things, but I'm aware this is a real problem, and it is a real problem. I want to be clear on that. There is almost no difference in a game being pay to win and a game being perceived as pay to win, right? Because this Punnett square is not like the Punnett square of the entire community. This is the Punnett square of a single person's view of a game. Because the community is not this unanimous thing that all feels one way, despite the Reddit's best efforts to convince you of that. And from a single person's perspective, most of them are not going to find out they're wrong by posting online and having someone convince them that it's not actually pay to win, right? They're going to think that people saying it's not pay to win are just the other deluded category, where they're diehard fans who don't want to admit they're wrong about the game and it's pay to win. Or they're just not going to be convinced because they're going to trust their own experience over this gobbledygook someone else is saying on the internet, right? Unironically, I just looked up the origin of gobbledygook because I was like, wait a second. Does this word have a racist origin? It sounds like it could be making fun of a foreign language. No, it's related to turkey gobbling. We're clean. We're good. But anyway, back to what I was saying. I think that there is a tangible negative impact of people falsely perceiving the game to be pay to win. It seems like it's just like, oh, it's a weird human psychology thing, you can't fix it. I guarantee you there's a different structure for the prize pass where, like, if you had level 0, pick one of 3, or sorry, pick one of 2, and then you got the other one at level 30, I'm not sure how much that would affect bottom line, and I think it would help to alleviate this problem. Maybe it would affect bottom line more than I think. I don't know what people are really spending money on, but I will say that I genuinely think this is a real problem, and you don't see it as much as you should because the Reddit's super heavily censored, but I have to deal with all the stuff people are saying. I make no effort to moderate my own community. That's not exactly right. I do occasionally hide comments or ban people, but most often it's like, oh, that guy's super wrong, but he's valid to feel like that. I'm not going to put a heart on that message, but that guy is super wrong. I'm not going to hide his discussion, but I'm going to try to figure out how that happens. And that's where this little tangent's coming from. With people being like really upset at falsely perceived pay to win, it's still driving them away. If they have a conversation about the game, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, that game's surprisingly pay to win. I had a really bad time. This new dino set came out, everyone was playing dinos, you get crushed by it all the time, I just couldn't be bothered, man. And like, he's wrong about it being broken. It's not the strongest thing in the game. That was a free-to-play strategy. But he's not wrong to feel that way, and it gives the game negative press. And trying to design a system that fixes that, even though it's not the company's fault, they had designed something that wasn't pay to win, is still the company's responsibility to try to avoid that user experience, right? And mostly I'm not here to try to fix it or tell you how it can be fixed. I've only recently became aware that it was even a thing, but I wanted to draw attention to it because, especially with the Reddit being so heavily censored as it is, I'm not sure how aware Tempo is of this as a problem. And it does have tangible negative effects on the perception of the game within the larger gaming community. So I wanted to bring it up, but I really don't have a solution to it. It's just a weird thing that I've been thinking about a lot because it's my like part-time job at this point to talk about this game at a high level and then listen to people talk back about it to me. And it's just like, they're wrong, but they're valid in feeling wrong, and the systems guide them to this wrong conclusion. What can be done about it? Just saying, they're idiots and shrugging your shoulders is not the right response. There is a way to fix it. I just don't know what it is. And I'm interested in hearing other people's opinions about it, but I think I've rambled by far more than enough. I hope you enjoyed hearing all this nonsense from me. Tell me how you've been doing on the meta. Tell me if you have any ideas how to fix the complicated perception issues caused by survivor bias for new and more casual players. I got nothing. I really don't know of a clean solution, because obviously if you just give everyone the packs, that solves it, but the company needs to make money, and I don't know what percentage of their money comes from people specifically spending gems they bought with real life money or spending the money on tier skips in the prize pass. So yeah, I'm gonna stop rambling. I'm going in circles already. Oh, also, if you could leave a like on the video and subscribe and all that jazz, it really does help the video improve. And anytime I'm doing some sort of like podcasty deal, I just forget to do it because I'm just Pavlov's dog over here, right? The day one fight gets here, I'm like, oh yeah, time to do a call to action. Doing a podcast, there's no day one fight, just forget every time. But if you could do those things, it really does help the channel, and I really do appreciate it. Anyways, thank you for your time, and I'll see you out there on the Bazaar.